Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode. We really appreciate you joining us. This podcast really shows us how we can all learn, live, and thrive off of each other. By sharing our knowledge through our conversations, we will impart some knowledge whilst learning ourselves how to progress even further. Here is your host.
Expert and professionals. I guarantee you, you're going to move from where you are to where you need to be. Now, on today's show, I have Dotcheva, Alexandra Dotcheva, beg your pardon, who is the author of the book. It really is simple, an holistic approach to self-confidence. She's also a registered nurse and a real estate investor. Welcome to Life Well Lived, Alexandra Dotcheva.
Thank you so much, Omobola, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining me on the show. You'll be talking about self-confidence, self-esteem, which is very important emotions that we all battle with in our daily lives. And I think it's very important for us to begin to address this topic at such a time as this. Now, talking about self-imposed and self-sustained limits that we bring on ourselves, how does fear and anxiety, how do you think it plays a role?
I did struggle a lot with all of the above for over 20 years. Yes, it was mostly self-imposed, and eventually I had to face it because I was in an industry that wasn't in favor anymore, such as violin for 30 years, and I had to put myself through nursing school. Then I became the investor, and I had to face all these limits if I wanted to make any further steps in my life at age 32.
All right. I would like you to talk a bit about fear and anxiety. I would like you to talk a bit about that. In terms of how we bring limits onto ourselves, what role does fear and anxiety, what role does it play in that regard?
So fear and anxiety, they are very natural emotions in humans, but unfortunately in the United States, I have noticed as a nurse, they have gone off limits with many people and they make them quite dysfunctional to the point that they can't really deal with the basic problems and challenges in their lives. And many of them opt to take medications for it instead of actually facing these problems by taking action, right? And this is what really prompted the book eventually in 2020, because I realized I was one of those people who struggled with anxiety due to stage fright when I was a violin performer, right? And I'm very familiar to anxiety, lack of confidence, and putting yourself down because you didn't perform the way you wanted to perform or the way you were expected to perform. So it's a choice whether you let this beat you down or get you motivated, right? And being very familiar with these insecurities, which I eventually made myself overcome, I thought I could be very helpful to people by writing this book, because this is honestly, Omobola, the book I wish I could have read 15 years ago. But it wasn't present at the time when my journey started towards overcoming all these anxieties, fears, guilt, self-deprecation, very useless feelings that prevent us from becoming who we want to be. And it is ultimately truly our responsibility to face these problems one by one step at a time, because you can read all the inspiring books and watch all the inspiring podcasts that you want, but eventually you're the one who has to take action and transform your life.
Now, one of the focus of your book is lack of self-confidence. Now, we all have different root causes of our challenges in life or adversities. In your own experience, what do you think was the root cause of the lack of confidence that you had, and how did you overcome them?
First of all, just being apparently socially awkward as a child, which I didn't know for many, many years. I accepted it in some way. So I was a very lonely child, even though I was going to school like everybody else. And this awkwardness then transformed into introvert type of personality and a self-imposed low expectations of every day that I went by. So I made myself, I was an early teenage, actually 11 years old, when I decided I was not going to have good expectations of the day. And if something positive happened, I would always focus on the negative side of what had happened. I thought that was cool. I thought that was self-protective. And it truly grew to a very like a monstrous type of mindset over the next 10 years. And you don't realize that happens until you truly want to achieve something very important, and you cannot condition yourself to think positively about your own abilities to achieve it. And it does become out of control. Unknowingly, you start believing your negative self-conditioning over several years, especially when you're a teenager and in your early 20s, because that's when you're most impressionable. And you truly believe what you think, even though you think that you're self-imposing it and you can control it, eventually it controls you and becomes this very low self-esteem, lack of confidence that prevents you from moving forward in your life.
Really, you mentioned abilities. Now, I like us to talk a bit about this. Now, do you think that low confidence affected your abilities at one point? No. Okay, the question is talking about abilities now. Do you think low self confidence that you had, it affected your abilities as a person? And also, do you also see yourself having errors in your thinking?
It does affect your abilities, because I was one of those people who practiced the violin for 7 to 9 hours a day. So I was not a lazy person. I was also studying foreign languages when I was a teenager. And then later, when I came to the United States at age 24, I already had this very bad nervous spell on stage. And yes, it did affect my ability to perform, because I was performing way better in the practice room between the four walls, just with myself and the violin. And on stage, it was a very different story, like 60% of what I could deliver. So yes, your mental self-conditioning may dramatically affect your ability to perform in the moments that you deem most important.
Right. Thank you, Alexandra, for sharing that with us. Still talking about the important takeaways in your book. Talking about low self-esteem, I have had to struggle with that, and I know that you also do that. Self-esteem is all-encompassing, right? And you also struggle with that in your early years. So let's talk about the science of low self-esteem and how can we build high self-confidence?
Everybody has a different answer to this, and therefore it might require a different approach. But in my case, what happened was my profession became economically irrelevant between 2006 and 2008. So after being a musician professionally for 26 years, I had to completely stop that after I became a nurse. So this was a dramatic change. It was traumatic in many ways. However, it was extremely helpful to rebuild myself, because I knew there was no going back. That was a choice completely of my own, unlike the violin, because when you're a little child, your parents may choose, okay, so you're going to play the violin now, and my parents were musicians. But with the nursing transition, and then in 2014, the addition of real estate investing, which was another very unfamiliar field for me at the time, these were the things that completely transformed my thinking, because I really, really wanted to accomplish. And I became very frightened of remaining poor due to my own mindset. So once I understood that if I change my mindset, I can accomplish way more than I had by that time when I was 32, somehow I believed it. Because I said, if I self-imposed low self-confidence, I can self-impose belief in my ability to accomplish. And that's what I did. And it was not easy to do. It took about 5 years. Then in the next 5 years, I started seeing the results. So it's not an instant thing, okay? But the more you make yourself learn unfamiliar stuff, the better your chances are to rebuild yourself, because you solve problem after problem after problem that previously you thought impossible to solve, and make yourself financially independent. And then the choices are all yours, because you created it that way.
Right. I see you're an entrepreneur, you're a nurse, you're an author, and also a real estate investor, 3 in 1. And I know that you also run all the work that you do there. And in terms of mindset, how does mindset comes to play when it comes to juggling these conflicting but important priorities of your life, and also attending to your own personal needs?
The person